This is Halloween, and if you love haunted history and cemetery walkthroughs as much as I do, you may want to subscribe because I'm going to be taking you somewhere new every week. Today, we're going to be going to downtown Tampa. As with any historic location or downtown area, it's a hot spot for paranormal activity. And many of those buildings are so old that just naturally there are entities or people that don't want to leave. This was their home in life or their masterpiece in life. And after they pass, they want you to know about it. So let's get to it and talk about some of the history of Tampa. Hey! We're here at the Fort Brooke parking garage in downtown Tampa. And if you've lived in Tampa, Florida long enough, it should come as no surprise to you that this original area belonged to the Seminole Indians, and prior to that, the Tocobagas. But in 1822, the white man laid eyes on this property, and within just 2 years of their arrival, this became U.S. territory. So in 1824, this general area was established as U.S. territory. Once here, Colonel George Mercer Brooke and 4 companies of the 4th U.S. Infantry arrived at this location where there's now a parking garage, and they built a wooden fort that was known at first as the Cantonment Brook Fort, and within just 1 year became Fort Brooke. One of the soldiers stationed here at Fort Brooke at that time, his name was George A. McCall. He actually wrote a letter to his father while he was stationed here that perhaps recounted one of Tampa's first ghost stories. In the letter, he stated that at 9:30 one foggy morning, a sentinel had climbed to the top of a live oak tree as far as he could climb to see as much of Tampa as he could see and basically keep watch over the fort. Lo and behold, as soon as he got up to the top, he noticed 4 to 5 ships on the Tampa Bay shoreline. He called out, "Sail ho!" It immediately alerted those men and officers that were within the fort to go and see what he saw, which was these ships on their coastline. Colonel George Brooke ordered refreshments and alerted some men and officers to accompany him to the shoreline, and they were going to go over by boat and greet them with refreshments. So he gathered up his men and officers, and they took to the boat and they started to sail off when an officer called out, "Where are the vessels?" And upon looking across the shoreline, they could see none. Where there once stood 4 to 5 large ships, there was now nothing. They seemingly vanished into thin air. So that is maybe one of the first ghost stories here in Tampa. This Fort Brooke parking garage, as you can see where I'm standing, a lot of encounters have happened here, and I think some of the reasoning for that is that after they demolished the original fort many years ago, I mean, it just became condemned more or less. So they demolished the fort and they wanted to build a parking garage on the land. As they began construction and started digging into the land to build the foundation for the structure, they started to find bones, human remains of soldiers, as it appeared. They would find thick wool material because back then the uniforms were made of a heavy woven wool material, and they had these gold buttons. So they found remnants of that. They found bodies that they believed to be soldiers from that time period. They also found Seminole Indians. It was archaeologists that had to do the testing on the remains of the bodies to find out about exactly how old they were, so that they could figure out, who these remains belonged to. They found out that even Tocobagas were still buried here from 2,000 years ago. As we do here in Tampa, the city must keep growing, So they still proceeded with the plans for the garage. But in order to still honor relevance of those who came before it, they excavated the bodies. Anything that they could find. If they found remains of soldiers, then they gathered them up. And then if they found remains of the Seminoles, they gathered them up. And then they only found a few remains of the Tocobaga Indians, and they gathered them up. Once all the bones and any fragments of remains were excavated, some of the remains ended up in the Oak Lawn Cemetery. And that would be the soldiers that were found to have been buried here, and the Tocobagas. And the reason for the Tocobagas also being buried here is that they really have no remaining extended family here. They literally died off. So they're buried in a mass grave as well over at the Oak Lawn Cemetery. Now the Seminole Indians were buried over near the Seminole Hard Rock Casino, and they have their own memorial over there. So the bodies were excavated and relocated to other areas where they could remain hopefully at peace. However, people have reported still hearing the echoes of those who've passed in this parking garage. Some people have claimed to have seen shadow figures. Others have claimed to hear the beating of Indian drums. Others have heard disembodied voices. You should come over to the Fort Brooke parking garage and see for yourself if you hear anything not of this world. We're going to do our own little investigation right now. So as you can see, we have the REM pod set up, and it is going off a bit. Some of the colors are lighting up already. We are in the Fort Brooke parking garage stairwell, and we're going to see if we can contact anyone. My husband's got the spirit box over here. Do we have anybody, any Tocobagas here tonight, or any of the Indians that perhaps were disturbed when they excavated the grounds? Are you mad that we're here? Maybe a little bit. Do you get a lot of this? Do you get a lot of people asking me questions? Now remember, this REM pod is supposed to only go off when the steel rod makes contact with anything at all. Now I saw that you lit that green button up a little bit. Who are we speaking with? Is this an Indian? A soldier? Colonel Brooke? Do a lot of people come in here trying to make contact? If I'm speaking with somebody specifically, you can communicate through the spirit box on who you might be, if you're one of the Indians or soldiers. Are you happy with where you're resting now? At Oak Lawn? Or over near the casino? If there's anyone in here with us at this moment, are you able to light up any of those other lights? I saw you light up the green a little bit. There's skateboarders in here, so that's probably messing with the vibe. We're outside of the stairwell now, and it appears somebody wants to talk. Is there anybody here with us right now? If there is, can you light up one of those lights on the REM pod? All you have to do is go close to the bar and tell us that you're here. Or you can communicate with my husband through the spirit box. I just would like to know, is this place haunted by the Indians that originally owned the land? Is there something I haven't mentioned that you want me to talk about? What is it? You could communicate with my husband through the spirit box. We will respect your territories. If you want us to leave, light up one of those lights if you can. And we will leave. We're here at 4 Green Fields, gonna pop in and get a bite to eat. And Winterbauer's joining me today. This'll be fun. At one time, this store right behind me was, well, actually today it's a coffee house or tea house or something like that. But it used to be the old Tampa Book Company. It opened in 1995. Store owners David and Ellen Brown opened up the bookstore, and at that time had over 2,000 books to choose from. They specialized in rare and out-of-print books. When the bookstore ended up closing in 2017 due to maintenance issue, really no other explanation, they had over 40,000 books to choose from. Now, as the story goes, when David and Ellen Brown opened up this shop in 1995, it had been vacant for many years, over 20 years really. The store owner that owned this store before them, his name was Richard Bennett, and he was a tailor. One night he just decided he didn't want to do it anymore. He wanted to retire and he was done with the business. So he basically turned off the lights, locked the doors, and left all of his stuff behind. It remained vacant for, like I said, over 20 years. As you can imagine, it got pretty dusty and kind of dirty and unkept in there. 20 years of being vacant and nobody to care for it. It became almost condemned. And then when Ellen and David took an interest in the building in 1995, they thought, well, let's work out a deal with the landlord and we'll see if we agree that we'll come in and clean it out and everything. Maybe he'll give us a couple months rent free of charge. So they worked out a deal with the landlord at the time, and that's what they did. They ended up moving in. They took over the shop. They moved all of their books in. As they were moving in, they found some of the previous owner's belongings that they decided to keep. 2 chairs that looked like they'd be for children, but remember back in the day we were a lot smaller individuals. There weren't McDonald's on every corner like there are now, and everybody was smaller. So it was actually chairs that Richard Bennett used to use when he was tailoring. He'd often sit in them and work long hours. And there was also a very large pair of scissors that they decided to keep. They thought, oh, you know, what a cool novelty to have. And of course, being that it was a bookstore, they would probably come into use from time to time. So they ended up keeping the large pair of scissors, which they kept on a hook at the front desk. Years into their stay here, they were doing very well as a bookstore. Well, one night, cameras caught movement inside the building. And so immediately the cops were alerted to an intruder in the store. And when the cops came to look in the store, nobody was there. They didn't see that anything had been disturbed. No books appeared to have been stolen, and everything seemed to still be in its right place. They told the store owners, we don't see anything here, we're gonna go on about our way. So the store owners were fine with it. And the very next day, Ellen Brown shows up to open up the store. She sees that the scissors aren't still on the wall. Now, she notices that everything too is still in its right place. Nothing else has been disturbed, but she seemed to recall hanging those scissors back up before she left for the night, and they were always on that hook on the wall. So she goes looking around and she finds the scissors on the floor. And as she goes to pick up the scissors, she immediately steps back, because as she gets closer, she notices that there's blood on the scissors. It startled her. So she steps back. She's like, oh my God, what's happened? She follows a trail of blood that leads to the back storage room and leads her to a hole that in the wall where an intruder might have come in. Evidently, it appears to be that an intruder perhaps was in the bookstore that night and created a hole in the wall so that they could get out and head out to the street where somebody had picked them up, you know, after they had broken into the bookstore. She was obviously very startled by this. Her and her husband were not believers in the paranormal, but some have surmised that perhaps that was the ghost of Richard Bennett, not wanting people intruding on his store. And obviously those being his scissors to begin with, grabbing for the only thing that he had to avenge Mr. and Mrs. Brown, as they were not there to tend to their store, a store that at one time was his store. They oftentimes had things misplaced in the store. When it was a bookstore, things would be misplaced. The scissors would be in different spots. The chairs would be moved around. The things that belonged to Mr. Bennett were the items that seemed to move around the most. But like I said, being that the Browns were not believers in the paranormal, they never really chalked it up to anything, any kind of activity like that. But as you know, there are a lot of believers out there that do believe that the old Tampa bookstore was in fact haunted. Now, unfortunately, since it closed in 2017 with really no explanation other than maintenance issues, may leave one to wonder, were these maintenance issues caused by the spirit of Richard Bennett, or was it something else? Let's go on to our next stop. The Sykes building was constructed in 1988. It stands 454 feet tall and it has 31 stories. If you remember from one of my last videos, the Union Italiana Cemetery video, where I talked about the three brothers that were restaurateurs here in Tampa, Malio, which is one of the brothers, actually owns a prime steakhouse here in the Sykes building. It's actually on the bottom floor, and you can come check that out. The official name of the building itself, once it was constructed, was the Rivergate Tower. It's always been my favorite when I was growing up because it was cylindrical shaped, and it's really a staple of Tampa. So when you think about Tampa, you think about the cylindrical building that is the Sykes building. So like I was saying, we just got kicked out because evidently there's no filming in there. But we're just outside the building now. We're on the Kennedy side of the building. Nobody knows it as the Rivergate Tower today. But anyway, Dan Kiley, back when it first opened up in 1988, he was responsible for the architecture of the landscaping outside of the building, which consisted of crepe myrtles and several other plants. Now, it was a really beautiful building outside, as well as a very unique looking building. Inside, the architecture of it was unique because of its cylindrical shape. The architecture of the building and the landscaping of the outside were actually all designed based on the mathematical Fibonacci numerals. Maybe that's why it's cylindrically shaped. The landscaping is actually on top of a 2-story parking garage. So when you are on premises, there's a 2-story parking garage just beneath the surface. Well, what happened was all of these beautiful plants that Dan Kiley had planted on the grounds had started interfering with the underlying parking garage. So in 2006, they pulled up all the plants, and now it's very barren and not very lush at all. Some people have said that it looks kind of like more like a gravesite than beautiful floral grounds like it once was. So the story goes is there's a ghost tour that runs through downtown Tampa, and there was a lady on the tour one night that was a paranormal researcher or paranormal investigator, some kind of psychic, something like that. And as they were walking by the Sykes building, it was not a stop on the tour, but she said, whoa, 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 stop. You know, she was telling the host to stop. She said that there are 2 spirits haunting the Sykes building. Of course, the ghost host was interested to know who these people could be, and the psychic didn't really know for sure who they were, but she knew she was getting a feeling and that she really felt that there were 2 ghosts haunting the grounds. Being that this Dan Kiley had designed the entire landscaping, and he ended up passing away in 2004. When they pulled up all his landscaping, I'm sure that was unsettling to a spirit that put his hard work and effort into both the design and landscaping of this building. So it's believed, or maybe you could surmise, that one of the ghosts that haunt the building is actually the spirit of Dan Kiley himself, and that he didn't want to be forgotten about, and he wanted his story to be told, so that on this ghost tour he made his presence known to this psychic, so that maybe someday somebody would cover his story and the fact that they dug up all of his hard work. And the other ghosts, we don't know. Evidently, there are 2 spirits haunting the Sykes building. If you ever want to check out the Sykes building, it is a beautiful building. Now, you can't film inside. I'm not 100% sure if that's true. I think maybe the security guard over there was just bored, and that was the most exciting thing he had to do all day. So, what do you think, Winterbauer? Maybe a power trip?
Trigger happy.
Yeah. I think so too. So he just wanted to kick somebody out, and he kicked us out today. So, but whatever.
And it's
a beautiful building.
We asked him. So.
Yes, it's a beautiful building. And if you go just alongside the building, not too far, it's very close to Riverwalk. They actually do have an amphitheater in there that you can stand on a square in the amphitheater, and your voice is like projected like a million times. It's awesome. But check that out. Check out the Riverwalk. Check out Tampa, because it's a cool place to be. Yes. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I hope you enjoyed today's walkthrough of Tampa. It's my home. It's a place that I love, and really you could find out anything you want about any city, you know, where you're from or someplace that you're traveling. I always purchase a book anywhere I go. When me and my husband travel, I purchase a book about the historic places in that city or the haunted places in that city. It's just, I kind of have a collection of these books. My information came from this one, Haunted Tampa, Spirits of the Bay. It's by Deborah Fretham. You can get this if you are from the Tri-County area here in either Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater area. You could probably get it at your local Walgreens. If not, you can, I'm sure, get it online if you wanted to learn more about the history of Tampa. We've only just scratched the surface here. Other information I find online. It's kind of a combination of what I read in books, what I find online. I just wanted to make sure I sourced that out because these stories did come from this book this time. You may have noticed in some of the footage that I was still wearing my Christmas stuff. It's just because that part of the footage was filmed at a different time. I actually had planned to add that to my Florida Inn Hotel episode from a couple weeks ago, but it didn't make the cut, so I added it on to this one. That does it for today's episode. Hope you had a great new year. I'll see you next time.